What are some things that you should avoid saying to an autistic person? Well, in this video, we're about to find out. Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Venmo Wehrli, here to help educate and inspire you about autism. Now, before we get started, if you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe, hit that bell notification icon so that you don't miss any latest updates from me. And now, onto the video. Why do I feel like that this is a very important topic to address? I have often addressed how difficult it is for autistic people to navigate through the world because of their learning barriers and their communication barriers, as well as their lack of social skills. So therefore, you need to be wary of what you say and do to them if you are to associate yourselves with them. And this can go for parents of autistic individuals, or teachers with autistic students, or employers that are working with autistic employees. The first thing you should not say to them, and please God, do not say this to them, you should already know these things by now. I say this because oftentimes when I am performing a job and I ask for help or clarification, I get told to follow the process or that I should know these things by now. It's really stressful when I'm trying to do a job and I'm not given the help I need to be able to do my job well. If I was assisting a customer and a customer came to me with an issue that I didn't know how to resolve and I had to ask for help but got told to follow the process or that I should know these things by now, I'm going to be wasting the customer's time working under pressure to try and come up with a solution to help that customer. And there's no guarantee that I can come up with a right solution to help that customer. All it's going to do is just make the customer more erratic, and it's going to make the business look bad. Also, there are probably hundreds of things that autistic people should know at their current age, but unfortunately, because their brains do not process like a typical person's does, they don't pick up on things as fast as typical people do, and therefore, they're not as exposed to situations as typical people are. A good term to define them would be late bloomer. I myself am a very late bloomer. Also, do you not make mistakes? Have you ever not asked for help before? Yes, you may cover things in the initial training or in the manual or during team meetings, but autistic people sometimes need to revisit things that were already addressed. They may need to have the information presented to them in a different way to help them better understand it. You can either reword how you presented it to them, you could make use of visuals to help them get a clear picture of what the procedures are, you could work one-on-one with them in a less distracting area so that they would be able to focus on what it is you're teaching them. Not only do autistic people need to revisit information in different ways to understand it, but different scenarios are going to come up that autistic people would not have expected to run into. These scenarios that come up may have similar aspects as to what was covered in the training, but autistic people are so linear that they cannot grasp the similarities. Sometimes we need to revisit things multiple times. Sometimes we need to have things said to us multiple times in different ways. We learn differently than others. And you know what? So do you. And so does everybody else. Number 2, have you ever thought about dating someone with autism? Now, as an autistic person, I am not opposed to dating someone who is on the spectrum, just as long as they are the right match for me. But it really irritates me when people ask me if I've ever considered dating someone who is on the spectrum because I myself am autistic. And the reason why is because it makes me feel like I'm being labeled or categorized as another species, like an animal or something. And it also makes me feel like you're telling me that I'm just simply not good enough to be dated. Autistic people are not a different species, so telling me to date someone with autism is not like saying that a different animal should date something of its own kind. Also, people date all sorts of diverse people. Why is it okay for black people to date white people, or Americans to date foreigners, or fat people to date skinny people, but it's not okay for autistic people to date typical people? One thing you also gotta understand is that when it comes to autistic individuals, there are 5-to-1 autistic males and autistic females, with males being 5 and females being 1. You also need to be aware that there are many different functioning levels of autism on the spectrum. Some people with autism are nonverbal, and some people with autism cannot act independently. Also, autistic people are not the same exact person. Everybody is different. Number 3, I know what it's like Do you now? Well, how exactly do you know what it's like? Do you have some sort of invisible barrier that is making it hard for knowledge to enter your brain? Do you have people communicate to you in a language that makes absolutely no sense to you and treat you badly for not understanding? Do you have people that judge you and assume that just because you're dumb that it's okay to mistreat you? If you don't have any of those things happening to you, then how can you possibly know what it's like to be in our shoes? Number 4, I've seen other autistic people handle this just fine. So are you saying that people who share the same label are now automatically the same exact person and therefore can do every single thing that the other person can? Well, let me ask you this. Let's say you have 2 iPhone 12s, same brand, same model. Are they going to be able to do the same exact thing or perform the same exact task? That all depends on who's handling them or what their current state is and how they're being handled. Now here's another question. If you take your most famous recipe and you give it to someone else to try making it, you have all the ingredients and all the steps lined out. Are they going to be able to replicate your famous recipe the way you do it? Chances are that it's very unlikely. So therefore, you should not assume that just because one autistic person does well in a certain field doesn't mean that another autistic person is going to be just like that one. I run into this problem a lot when I am in job fields and I let the employer know that I have a learning disability and sometimes it's hard for me to understand certain things, and then they respond with, well, we've had people with learning disabilities that do just fine. It's not like I'm using my disability as an excuse, which brings us to number 5. You should not be using your disability as an excuse. See, people with autism are prone to making more mistakes than the average typical person, and they're more likely to ask for help than others. I remember one time when I was in college and we were past midterms and I found out that I was not doing so well in the class, so I came to my professor to let him know that because of my disability I struggle with understanding certain things, and he flat out accused me of using my disability as an excuse to pass the class. But that wasn't the case at all. I was letting him know that I have a hard time processing things and understanding things, so I need certain help in order for me to understand the class better and pass the class. Same with employers. When I let the employer know that I'm autistic and I have a hard time understanding things, and they accuse me of using it as an excuse just so that they wouldn't have to fire me, that's not the case at all. I'm letting them know this so that they can work with me in a different way to help me understand how to do the job better. If you make a notion to discipline an autistic person, I would urge you to take into consideration that they may not be trying to misbehave on purpose or jeopardize your job. It's just a tough field for them. Navigating as an independent adult is not always easy for autistic people. That's why you need to be aware that there are some certain things that you should avoid saying or doing if you're going to work with them. Think of it like this. You take an American who's very well fluent in English and you knock him out, ship him to another country like France or Germany, and he does not speak French or German at all, but he wakes up and finds himself in an area completely surrounded by people that speak a different language than him and don't understand English. How do you think he's going to function in that area? Do you think it would help him at all if other people in a different country were to give him a hard time for not being able to understand? Well, thank you all so much for watching this video, and I hope that this provides valuable insight to those who are looking to understand more about autism. If you are interested in seeing more content from me, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell notification icon. And if you have anything else that you would like to see from me, or any comments, questions, or suggestions, please leave them in the comment section below and I will do my best to respond to them. And I'll see you all in the next video.